Welcome to Lit Happens, Unpacking Senior English. I'm Adriel.
And I'm Belle.
We're experienced English teachers dedicating to supporting both new and experienced educators in a world in which we are often time poor, to empower our students to excel in their English studies.
If you're an English teacher, like us, navigating this curriculum, then this podcast is designed with you in mind. And our mission really is to break down the complexities by unpacking English nationally.
Well, welcome back everyone to episode 33 of Lit Happens. And today we are going to be going through the text selections for standard English as per the new syllabus in 2027. Joining me today again, we have Belle. Hi, Belle. How you going?
Hello. Good, thank you. Everyone's deep in trial marking, I think. So we're chugging along, aren't we?
Surviving, I think that's probably the word at the moment as an English teacher. Surviving. That's the human experience anyway, if you're a Year 12 teacher.
Yeah.
Listening to this. But let's get started actually with our little quip for today, which is actually quite relevant to what we've just spoken about. So, Belle, what do you think? Lit or quit? Trial HSC marking as an English teacher. Is that lit or is that quit?
This is a really good one because I'm in totally two different minds. Look, admin wise and hours wise, I think we're definitely going in quit territory here because it takes a long time. And usually when you're marking the trial exam, you're doing a whole section, like a whole cohort section. So that's a lot in itself. Finding the time and brain power to do that is a lot. And then on top of that, a lot of schools now are very particular with detailed feedback. So, which I think takes more time than actually marking the thing, to be honest.
That's right.
That's right. Putting a mark and creating your range, you're like, I'm good. And then you're like, now I've got to go back in and write and record. And I think as English teachers, because our responses are so subjective, and they have to be because we want personal voice and all that, but it means that you then get so bogged down in the thinking of the task and the breaking down, because you actually have to think, well, what are they doing well so that you can get feedback on what they have to improve. And in saying that, though, I do like the trial marking because, one, it's HSC course. Most of us as English teachers love teaching our seniors because that's when we can get into the nitty-gritty of text types and that more critical thinking. So that's lovely. And I think you learn so much from trial marking. Depending on I just did some trial marking I did module C, which I've marked before, but I did some trial marking for a school's cohort on Go Back to Where You Came From for the common module. And, we had taught that at our school a while ago, and then we changed prescriptions. So it was nice, I think, to come in with that open lens of open slate of what are these kids going to show me? Do you know what I mean? Because I didn't have the same expectations I would normally when I've taught it. And in my head, I'm like, well, my kids should be able to do this, this, and this. It was kind of nice going in on a trial exam, given benefit of the doubt because of the exam conditions, and just see what they produce, see what they put together. And so that's why I'm always in two minds. I love that part, but I hate the admin part, right?
I 100% agree. Let's start off. To be honest, after this weekend of trial marking, I do definitely feel like quitting. Because we had a rainy weather all week, and then we had a beautiful, sunny weekend, and I found myself locked in my room getting through over 100 papers or so. So it definitely felt like it was a quit sort of stage there. But in saying that, as you've mentioned, you learn so much from the trial marking, and it's also a good, it's probably one of the best gauges to sort of then prep yourself in the next 6 weeks or so, depending on where your trials sit in your school term, to really focus in on what your kids need. And this is probably a good time for students if you're listening as well. I know we're speaking about English teachers here, but if you are listening, please remember your teachers are putting effort into the marking of these trial papers. So jump on board the bandwagon. If teachers are spending weekends locked away, or hours after school trying to pop some feedback onto your papers, don't just leave it as per cool, I didn't do that well, or I'm all right with this. Like, continually work on that feedback or that feed forward that you've been given in order to get the best marks you can in the HSC. And that's sort of all we ask for as teachers, really. We don't want you guys to get lazy. We want you guys to actually use this as an opportunity to see, okay, cool, these are the areas where I struggled in the exam situation, being the first trial that you guys have ever sat, and the only trial that you will probably sit for the HSC.
Yep.
Look at it as an opportunity to learn. And this is why I do probably err more towards the fact that HSC trial marking is lit in a way, because you learn so much about your own pedagogy as well as a teacher.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
It guides, exactly. It guides your teaching processes as well. So, look.
It is lit. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah. It's just a lot of, that's right. It's just a lot of work. And, we try and tell the students, I guess, in a way that, you have to work hard. And as teachers, I guess this is the time where we earn our money. So, look, it is lit, and some great responses there. Again, would love if you guys pop in what you guys think about HSC marking or trial marking, or if you haven't actually been sort of pertinent towards the HSC trial marking, get involved in your school. Go sit in with your teams if they are, doing group marking together, and just get an understanding with your more experienced teachers or teachers that are sitting in the course, because inevitably you will be marking the trials, or, you'll have the opportunity one day to apply for HSC marking, and all of this will definitely help you in gaining confidence. I think that's probably the big thing when it comes to marking your 12 papers. Yeah.
Oh, couldn't agree more, Adriel. It makes you confident in, like, this is kind of what we're looking for, and these are the approaches, and then it just strengthens what you're doing in the classroom further from that. So absolutely right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly right. But no, thank you for that. Let's get into today's episode. Now, as we sort of mentioned, today we're going to be looking at prepping for the Stage 6 standard course under the new 2027 syllabus. And we're going to try and look at a little bit more of the exploration as to what the pattern of study might look like. So let's start off with, what might the pattern of study for standard English from 2026 and sort of look like, and what's new?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, for sure. So I've been looking at the prescription. So obviously there's new text selection. So we will talk about that shortly. Probably the newest thing is the syllabus outcomes, because we've still got the same topics. So, in year 11, you'll be doing reading to write, transition to English standard in that first term. Term 2 will continue with contemporary possibilities, term 3, close study of literature. The new thing is that this starts next year. So your year 11s for next year in 2026, they need to be starting the first course, first rubric topic, reading to write, transition to English standard in term 1. And that needs to align with the new syllabus outcomes. So most of us would already have a program for reading to write standard English that we've been doing the last several years. You do need to bear in mind that there might be slight changes in the rubric and therefore changes in the outcome, and you need to make sure that correlates. So I think the biggest thing is that emphasis on the new outcomes and what skills they want per different topic, because I know even in the last couple of lessons, Adriel, sessions that we did, Adriel, we talked about the fact that the prescriptions now, the rubric is more streamlined with the outcomes. And so you can sort of see out of those 6 new outcomes, the first module has a specific focus, the next module has a specific focus, and there's content points that align. And the beauty of that is it actually helps you organize your teaching and learning sequences when you follow those content points. So the biggest thing is, I think you don't need to reinvent the wheel as such, but you need to map it out according to the new outcomes.
It's funny you say that.
Yeah, go on.
It's funny you say that, like, in terms of the outcomes. I know doing the scope and sequence for the critical study recently for where I'm working at, the Mod B part in particular, I was looking at the outcomes and I'm like, oh, this is actually a lot easier, because it gives you a greater focus as to how, what skills you want to focus on for respective weeks in the term. And it definitely does
Yes.
build you towards more of like in the critical study or the close study of literature, I should say, in standard English there.
Yeah.
We are looking more at, building towards building the skills in how we approach a text through that close lens. And I found the outcomes were definitely less wishy-washy, I would say, more focused, more
Yes.
specific.
Much more focused. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's nice. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We do that.
No, you're
I
right.
do that quite a lot. I'm so sorry. Yeah, because it's nice because then it makes it a little bit more clearer what you're going to do the assessment. Like there's a more direct alignment.
Yeah.
And so because there's that natural focus and connection between the outcome skills and the assessment skills, and then when you put it together, it definitely streamlines what you're focusing on in your lessons, like in your activities, and makes it a lot more connected and stronger. And so, it sets that foundation for then what will happen next year is term 4 of next year will be the first official term of the new HSC with the new prescriptions. So that's when we get into, we must start in that term 4 with text and human experience. Then we've got, like we do this year, you've got a module A, language, identity and culture, a module B, close study of literature, and you've got module C, the craft of writing. The new thing is the new text combinations, because if we're looking at standard, I would say probably less than a quarter of the current prescriptions texts are there, and then you've got a lot of new texts, and actually more so in the standard course than I think in the advanced course. You've actually got some texts that are returning that used to be from a couple of prescriptions ago. So ones that we might have seen in discovery or belonging have kind of made a bit of a comeback, because I was looking at this list going, oh my God, I taught that 8 years ago, 9 years, like what, do you know what I mean? So it's, I think that's the newest element is that. And then the fact that in 2027, term 4, that will be the very first official new prescriptions HSC examination. So in terms of kind of the pattern, it's still going to follow like that. Now, obviously, as well, with your module A and your module B and craft, you still have flexibility about where you teach that. You don't necessarily need to teach it in that chronological order. And I know a lot of for a lot of schools where they teach those topics depends on what text type they have. So like if you're teaching a big novel or prose fiction, for example, you might get your students to read that over the big school holidays, and then you might do that in term 1, or if you've got trials end of term 2, for example, like some schools do, then you might decide to do something smaller, perhaps a film or a poetry. So I think schools still have that flexibility from our previous ones. It's just more so the new combinations, I think.
No, that's true. And it's like you've just sort of mentioned this, you're not having to recreate the wheel a lot of the time. So if you've got staff that have been around for a while, which is becoming more and more of a struggle these days as people start to move on into other careers, or that's right. But if you do have some more experienced teachers that will have actually studied some of these texts as per the new requirements and the new textual options there, start to pick their brain. I would say, like, how have you taught this before? How would you use this before? What are the key ideas that you can use in certain sort of responses, so in certain modules? So it's definitely something that looks intimidating and daunting at first, but there's lots of resources out there, and the best resources are your staff that have been around for a little while, I always say, options. But look, that's great there, Belle, in terms of the patterns, and not much has changed, bar, like you said, the textual options. So let's move on to the second question for today. We're going to look at what the assessments will look like for standard English in this new syllabus.
A little bit of change here. A lot of the assessment guidelines for standard are very similar to advanced, and then you've got your nuance when you'd go into the studies course or the EALD course. So we can talk about that later, or we'll probably have some separate episodes on that. But basically, very similar to what we're already sort of doing. Year 11, 3 big tasks out of 100. I think there's a caveat as well that you want to cap it at 40% for one task at the most, which is, I think, pretty fair. Like, it's probably a bit rough on the kids if one assessment is worth 50%. Like that's that might cause you
Leave
some
that for
issues.
uni.
So yeah, exactly. Whole other ball game that is, isn't it, Angel? Well, you know, you're currently doing some postgraduate study now as well. So yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I know that it was similar to what we talked about with advanced in terms of how you organize that percentage, I think depends on what your tasks are, where they are in the year, in terms of if there's like extracurricular stuff happening with year 11 around that time. Because I feel like increasingly now we have to be really thoughtful of the fact that students kind of come and go in our classroom a lot.
Yeah.
Like if they're in leadership, they're doing stuff. If they're in Kappa or major works, they're doing stuff. If they're like debaters and things like that, they might be out. So I think you might need to maybe look at your school kind of calendar and work that out too. But definitely, I think attaching the percentages based on what the text is, and you can also be really strategic and say which one do they tend to perform better in, and maybe that one's worth a bit more and the one that they struggle is worth less. And usually your prelim exam is worth more than the other two because there's lots of sections in there. But in terms of year 11 assessment, not too much change, I don't think.
No, I agree. And then like you're saying, I think the exam is probably more inclined to be weighted the heaviest. It just makes sense if you are planning, because it is something that summates the whole of their learning through the 3 terms that they do undertake the course. So you'd expect it to be the heaviest. And I will also say this, the requirements for, we've mentioned this before, the multimodal exam, assessment is now thrown out the door as well. So you don't necessarily have to have, the multimodal assessment, which we stress about quite a bit when we're teaching about the lie. It's just,
absolutely. Yeah, because you had like, well, what is the multimodal going to be? What's something that's like creative, but also accessible, also achievable? And then, usually with your multimodal, you're engaging a lot of different modes, and therefore there's multiple skills, and then, multiple criterias. And even I remember for marking, because if you had a multimodal activity, you might be giving a bit of marking criteria to the actual response and the text type and the expression. Then there's also probably for the multimodal component and that type of text type and form. And then, if it's like a speech or speaking, then you're also giving speaking skills. So it was a lot. It was nice. It was a nice task, don't get me wrong. Some students really like it. I think if you've got creative kids that want a chance to shine, it works well. If you've got strugglers at a studies class, doesn't work so well, for example. I think not forcing schools to do it means if you still want to do it, you can do it. And if you don't want to do it, you're not forced to shove that in somewhere. So I think it gives a lot of schools more control there with that.
I think I'm a little bit more old school now when we are, looking at some of those skills that eventually, like if we were backward mapping, again, what is the final task that they all will be sitting? It's going to be a big exam. And I just, as much as the multimodal assessment allowed students to flourish, like we were saying, that creative aspect, and it was really nice looking at some of those tasks. I just feel in the busy nature of the course, the HSC course, the prelim course, it was something that just took up a lot of time with minimal skills gearing towards the exam. So it's nice that they've actually sort of noticed this in this new implementation of the syllabus.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I think you can go on.
No, sorry. I think it's nice that we can actually look at this in terms of, well, how do we actually prep our students to work in exam pressures? I know a lot of us are going through HSC trial marking at the moment. And I mean, one of the biggest things that we say every single year in terms of the markers feedback is time management. And I mean, I see this quite often when we look at the Mod C text. The students have not been writing enough. And now in the age of computers where they're taking lots of their notes online and on docs and all this sort of stuff, I think just those in-class assessment tasks are big. And also with the, advent of AI now, I think it's very, very important for teachers to really consider, like, what is their assessment going to look like to avoid AI?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because I know not just at my school, but a couple of other schools that I work with, they're all reverting back to in-class tasks. Because it's almost like you just, not only can you not trust some of the students to take something home and not use AI to produce, but I think the biggest problem is then the admin that it takes to look at that and maybe hold students accountable is very tricky, depending on school policy and whether your school can afford something like Turnitin or not. I think a lot of English faculties are going, we're going to go back to our kind of basics. They might still give the question like a week before, so it's kind of open book in that regard, but at least you know that what's on the paper is what your students are producing. It's definitely something we have to think about. In terms of Year 12 school-based assessment, so slight changes now for this new HSC compared to the one that we're currently doing in terms of the percentages. So they've got 4 formal tasks, so, one kind of per term. In the previous prescriptions, it was only 1 exam, only 1 to be a formal examination. That language is not in the new one anymore. Which I think is probably good, because I know that different systems do different things and not all schools abide by that 1 formal exam. And then I think it could potentially create issues between students who have those unseen exam skills much more than others who don't, just because they've been doing that, even, so whatever, I'm not going to get into that. But I think now there's that. That's not kind of there. So it gives schools an option. You can do, again, what suits you. As long as 1 exam is a formal exam, but it doesn't have to be just 1 now, but at least 1. And then you've got those different weightings. So between 10% and 40%, which I think is pretty on average with the way that most schools would do their scope and sequence with assessment. And then the craft of writing, it says between 20 and 30%. So I know we talked about this last week with advanced. Schools, I do think, have to be really thoughtful with who is their cohort, what text they perform well in, and what text they're still working on. And then I think they do need to be a bit strategic about the percentages. Obviously, we can't know until we try. So those first couple of years with the new prescriptions and new assessment guidelines are always, I think, trial and error. But I think if we go into it with a bit of a deliberate, I've looked at my data in the past, and therefore I feel confident assessing this more, assessing this with a lesser weighting, and I feel really confident about putting Module C. Maybe my students perform well historically in Module C, so we might do that more at the 30, or maybe they perform not so well, and we might keep it in the lower. I think this is where leeway works, pros and cons, I guess, to leeway. Leeway can work really well when you know your cohort really well and they're really predictable in that way, and you can pick things that work. Leeway also can be really scary, because I know as English teachers we overthink as a being, as a person, and that might, stress us out when we're programming and thinking, oh God, there's so much pressure to get the assessment weightings right. I think all you can do is with the best knowledge and intentions you have, try something, and just we got to rework it. And I think that's all any of us can do.
Exactly right. Awesome. Well, that covers our assessments. Let's move on to question 3 here. So what are some of those text selections for the new standard English course that teachers can look forward to moving into this new HSC?
Yeah, definitely. So in Year 11 Standard English, I know we said there's no multimodal assessment requirement anymore, and there isn't. But I think the one way they've still managed to embed that in the course somewhere is that when you look at the new syllabus for the Contemporary Possibilities module, there is a stipulation in there that you need to teach in there at least 1 multimodal and digital text. Now, that doesn't necessarily sound to me like it must be your prescribed or core text. So it could be like a bit of a related text, but that component has to be there. Yeah, which makes sense because the topic is contemporary possibilities. So it allows you to have that contemporary futuristic kind of connection when you are using more of a multimodal digital text. So that's got to be in there somehow. And then they do still ask for a substantial literary print text when you're looking at close study of literature. Now, again, in year 11, there aren't specifications of texts. The same with advanced. You can pick what you like, but you want whatever you have to connect either in module or thematically to the HSC. So maybe we'll talk about the year 12 ones, and then maybe we can talk about what correlates back to year 11. Yeah. So when you're looking at it for the standard course, it's 3 prescribed texts. So again, it seems like module C, you'll be able to pick what you like and you don't need a certain thing in there. So that gives you leeway again. So with standard, 1 prose fiction, 1 poetry, 1 drama or film or nonfiction. So before I go through those kind of combinations, it does say though, across year 11 and 12, you need quality literature, which should include an Australian work. You need to somewhere within stage 6 do an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander author and text perspective. You want something to represent diversity. So whether that's diversity of form or cultural or social or gender, I think this depends on your own school context here, but some sort of diverse representation in text, and integrating all the different modes: reading, writing, listening, speaking, viewing, representing, which I think that is really easy to do once you've also got that digital text. It kind of allows you to hit the modes that you wouldn't necessarily hit within print texts as much. So that's kind of the overview. Now, I'm always the big proponent of what you do in year 11 largely depends on what you do in year 12. We're all, I think, very conscious of like time and stuff like that. So we might not have time to reinvent the wheel and may not necessarily need to. I think maybe, Adriel, I might talk a little bit about what the texts are in year 12, and then maybe you and I can talk about what might work in year 11 then, what might align.
Sounds good.
All right. So basically you've got 1 prose, 1 poetry, 1 film, drama or fiction, and they must come from the common module, module A and module B. So it might look something like this. If you decided to do prose fiction in your common module, that would be Cold Enough for Snow, which is, I think, a new addition to the prescriptions. Or you might not want to reinvent the wheel and you might go Henry Lawson's short story there. Very accessible for standard English. Very accessible, I think, if you've got students from a range of like skill sets and things like that. I think Lawson, you can work around it. What that means then is that you need to do poetry, either in mod A or B, and then the film, drama, non-fiction in mod A or B. So let's say you did the prose in common, then in poetry that might look like contemporary Asian Australian poetry, which we've done before. It is new text though, so it is similar poets, but you know what they love to do? Yeah, we've got the poet, but we're gonna swap out the text for newness. Change it around. Yeah, so you might be doing something like that, which then means you would be doing in the film, drama or nonfiction, you might be doing in module B, Much Ado from Shakespeare, or the film, The Arrival. I think it's interesting they've left a Shakespeare in here. If you've maybe got a strong standard cohort and you want to stand out in your text combination, because I don't think many schools in standard would go the Shakespeare route.
Can I just jump in there?
Sure.
I would say, like you've just mentioned, for your stronger cohorts, do Shakespeare. Like, just do Shakespeare.
They'll stand out.
And even if you are doing, like, I don't know, I erred more towards Shakespeare instead of the film text, because I just find kids struggle with film, especially in standard. If you don't want students retelling or summarizing or recounting the film, do Shakespeare. Do Shakespeare, because it's a lot easier to sort of look at the construction of the text. And we know that when students get stressed, they revert to what they know, which is summary, retell, paraphrasing. Whereas if you can frame your study around Shakespeare's work, and I'm sure they will have done Shakespeare's work in junior school as well, it becomes a lot easier for them. That's my 2 cents there anyway, in terms of.
No, I think that's really good. I think that's a really strong point you make, because you're right. It's almost like the more that students watch these days, the less they're conscious about what they're watching, and they go on that literal retell, or they'll just tell you what happens in a scene rather than looking at the film as a holistic text.
That's right.
In some schools, though, they teach film from the get-go, and maybe your students are really good at that. But I think you make an excellent point. Well, look, there's lots of other film and drama. So you could also do Away from Michael Gow, which is making a reappearance. It's been in a few different prescriptions. There's lots of resources online. So if you've got a pretty decent standard cohort, they might do really well with that. There's also the film text One Night the Moon that fits in. So that is in our current prescriptions in Module A, Language, Identity and Culture. So some schools perhaps might already be doing that this year and then not want to reinvent the wheel, slide it across. I mean, it is in common for the new prescription, but that works well. That one also hits on your Indigenous text. You'll notice that in the standard prescriptions, there are a lot more Torres Strait Islander texts. Pretty much every module has one. So I might just so in common module, we've got that prose fiction that I spoke about. You can choose poetry in common. You've got Dobson's poetry, and then you've got Samuel Wagon Watson. So everyone who taught the first lot of human experience for advanced will remember the boomerang text, thunderstorms. What was it called? Boomerang in the Thunderstorm or something. Blanked on the name.
Or
you know,
it was the boomerang.
About.
Yeah, that's right. Or if you're in standard English and you did language, identity, and culture, contemporary Asian poetry, you'll have probably looked at Jaya Savage's poem Circular Breathing, which refers to Samuel Wagon Watson as well.
Yes, of course. Yes.
That's right. So you've got a few.
So there's like nice continuity. Yeah, definitely.
That's right.
So that one's good too, because it hits the Torres Strait Islander text. And then I spoke about Away One Night the Moon. When you're getting into Module A, a few of them are newcomers, but a few of the texts have definitely been done before, and there would be stuff floating around. So in Module A under prose fiction, Swallow the Air is making a return. I know that I taught that in the Discovery module many moons ago. Great Torres Strait Islander fictional text. That might work really well. It's also not too lengthy. There's also a text in there called The Namesake, which I'm not too familiar with. So like I said, some newcomers to the list. Then in the poetry, that's where you've got the contemporary Asian Australian poets and a poetry collection called Perseverance. And then in drama and fiction under Mod A, you've got a return or Shafana and Aunt Serena. That's been on the list for a long time. This is a really good culturally diverse text. So if you've got, a culturally rich standard cohort, they might connect really nicely with the Shafana and Aunt Serena. There's also a film called The Quiet Girl. I'm not too familiar with that one. So something new. And then when we're getting into Module B, we've got prose fiction Feed. So Feed has been on there for a while. Feed is going to be really, really popular. I know a lot of schools that are like, we're definitely doing Feed. If they weren't doing it already, they're doing it now, because I think it feeds in, well, no pun intended.
No pun.
I was like, whoops. But it relates really nicely to Contemporary Impossibilities, because it is that dystopian sci-fi text. Great novel, that one. So relevant. There's also a prose fiction text there called Limberlost. And then in the poetry, there's a new one from Duffy, Collected Poems. I'm not too familiar with that one. Now, Ujuru Nunakal's poetry is remaining, but it's different to what's on the current list, because I think in this year's prescriptions, the last year of the prescriptions, it's in Module B for standard, I believe. Actually, sorry, I lied. They've kept it in Module B, but they've subbed out the poems. Yeah.
Yep.
And then you've got your Much Ado About Nothing for Module B in drama, or you've got the film The Arrival, which to this day is a very interesting choice for me. I think that was a really interesting add to the prescriptions. So there's lots, I think, with I think with the pattern of study with the standard module, with the standard modules, they're a bit more similar in flow to how they've always been. Like you pick what you pick in common, then determines what you pick in mod A and B. I feel like it's advanced. That's a little bit more all over the place in that regard. Yeah. I feel like it's more streamlined. Like, so if you go, some things that I think might be popular, Adriel, I think Henry Lawson's short stories will be popular because there's so much out there, so much content. Yeah. I know Dobson's poetry used to be popular in the past, so that might be another way of if schools have stronger standard cohorts, they might go that way. I know a lot of schools are eager to do Samuel Wagon Watson's poetry, even though it's new. It seems to be really people are keen for that one. Other things that I think might be popular, I'm hearing a lot of people potentially doing contemporary Asian Australian poets because we've got a lot of diversity in most of our public schools in particular. Yes, I think that might be really easy to connect with students. Feed is going to be extremely popular. They're kind of my picks. What are you hearing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think definitely Lawson stuff. I know Kath Walker's stuff as well definitely is something, just because there's so much out there. One thing I will encourage teachers to sort of consider is this. I know we did this when we had the last iteration of these new changes. We decided to go down the path of the contemporary Asian poetry for for module A a while back, and it worked out so well for our cohort. It was probably the strongest performing section, and a lot of it was because we had new insights, and I think not many people had done it because it was extra work. And at the HSC level, I think it's nice to have fresh texts, and fresh insight. You definitely, if you are putting the effort into, get kids to look at the notes that you and your respective faculty have developed in terms of the programming for the respective unit. Yes, it's harder work, it's extra work, it's more, just depending on your time and everything like that. But it does work out in the end if the kids do jump on board. And I think definitely consider that. Don't be daunted by new texts. Try things out, and you can always change and adapt them as well as you go along. I just find like some of the more common texts, because there is so much availability online, it's like a double-edged sword, because kids have access to all of that information, and then that informed personal voice, that's right, can suffer. So there's just a few options. I think Kath Walker stuff is definitely good, and it's good that they're changing the texts that we're looking at, even for example, the contemporary Asian poetry. I definitely would love, myself personally, if you're teaching standard, get them to look at Shakespeare. And this is someone who, like I said in the last week's Lit or Quit, I actually preferred Shakespeare's tragedies as opposed to his comedies. But I would still say, have a look at Shakespeare's work there. Definitely more literary value for me personally. Look, that's sort of what I'm thinking at the moment. And I guess we'll move into our next question here, which probably covers a little bit of that. So so what are some of those what are some of those programming and planning tips for the new standard syllabus, which I sort of have probably just touched on, led us into?
So I think you and I are big proponents of backward map. What are your combos going to be for year 12? And then that will inform what text you pick in year 11. So similar to what we spoke about in advance, you can do this alignment in a couple of ways. You might align in terms of like text type. So if you know you're doing prose in module B, for example, in year 12, then you might decide that in year 11 module B, you might do prose. Sometimes it doesn't always align on text type though. So you might actually do more so like ideas or concepts. So whatever ideas or concepts you know you're going to be doing in, for example, module B. So let's say you're doing Ujuru Nuna calls poetry in module B, and then you know what ideas you're going to represent. Then in your year 11 standard module B, you might not be doing poetry in there, but you might be doing another ATSI text in there that's hitting on some of the ideas, even if it's not poetry, because what you're doing in year 11 then is you're teaching the skills and the components to then hopefully save you time and you don't worry about it in year 12. So I think you can be strategic too here, Adriel, based on your school cohort. cohort. So if you know that you're going to do a film in year 12, for example, and your students don't do well with film, then in year 11, I would put a film and I would do the nitty gritty film elements and techniques in there, so that hopefully you won't have to do that as much in year 12 and you can focus more on the text there. I think you can match it on thematic ideas, or you can match it on maybe context is a little less emphasized in standard than it is in teaching the advanced course. I will say, though, as a marker, any standard kids who are engaging with context, it's like pushes them up dramatically, I think, in the ranges. So you might also be thinking about context-wise. So, for example, if you know that you're going to do Henry Lawson short stories in year 12, then perhaps one of your texts in year 11 should have that Australian pioneer, that Australiana focus, so that you can cover that deep context there and kind of save you time a bit more when you're in the year 12. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. You want to sort of link those ideas. So you mentioned two things. You mentioned skills and ideas. Skills first and foremost. You build towards what you guys are going to be studying in year 12, so that you're not having to go back to, this is what a low angle camera shot sort of facilitates and why it's used, or this is, how certain literary techniques in prose text or poetry works. Like, really consider that, especially when it comes to your critical and your module A stuff, I think in particular. And then also, like, reading to write, consider, like, what sort of text are you going to be looking at in the Mod C text for your Mod C module, for year 12. What are you going to do in reading to write? Like, really think about that. Talk about this with your faculties, and consider your options. Really want to backward map. Start in year 12 and then move backwards. And then ideas, like, what are those big ideas? Context is massive. And if kids already have a big idea of what was happening around the time of their text, or, studying text of a similar time period, similar context, it's a good stepping stone into what they do then in year 12. So, you've definitely covered both of those things really well. And I think those are probably the two most important things I would consider.
I think so. Yeah. I think the other thing you might, once you consider those two, then maybe you might look at mimicking the type of assessment that they're going to do, or at least the skill within the assessment. So there's no multimodal, so you don't have to, because that's what we would all do. We'd all do the multimodal in year 11 in the hopes that we didn't waste as much time in year 12, right? So, for example, if you know that in Module B you're going to do a take-home, big essay response, then you might be doing that in Module B in Year 11. If you know that you're going to be doing unseen and then, the common essay, then you might be doing that in Reading to Write, because that was one thing that stood out to me too when you were giving your really, really great suggestions is I think it works nicely, and I've seen it work nicely if your Reading to Write kind of functions like your common module and Mod C together. Now, I know that's like, you're like, what the hell, that's a lot, that's two, but a light version. You don't have to go in the nitty gritty, but like, for example, what works well I think in Reading to Write, you establish the Reading to Write concept, and then you might also have a topic that allows you to get into the Reading to Write. Like, for some schools, it's like, for example, they might use the old ones. It might be change. It might be belonging. It might be like whatever it is, your little umbrella concept, that's your anchor. Then I would introduce a couple of unseen text and related text types, different ones, different text types. They will represent different ideas. And then that way you're hitting that part of what you're going to introduce for common module. Then you might have your actual core text. And with your core text, you might be doing your more analytical and formative essay response. And that mimics the common essay. And then you might develop from there. We're going to be working on our creative writing, branching off of that Reading to Write and key concept. And then that's supporting module C. Like I don't know. I'm a big fan of try a little bit of everything in that first term, because I think it's also really good. It shows me what my class can kind of do and what they can't do. Like, and every cohort is different. Like, oh, your essays are not good, or your essays are fabulous, but you can't do X, Y, Z well. So I think if you use that first term as a taster, it sets you up a little bit for everything you're going to do in year 12, but it also helps you learn your students a lot quicker so that you know what to devote your time to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Well, that's some excellent programming planning tips there. And I'm sure there's many more we can go through, but we'll leave that for another day. Let's move on to our last question for today. So what are some final thoughts, practical takeaways for programming? I guess we've sort of covered this in the last few questions.
Yeah,
What's your final, like if you were to give one piece of information, like knowledge, which you have many nuggets of knowledge there, what would you tell our teachers?
I think the one thing that I didn't mention is on the NESA website, they have the phases of learning, which if you did a lot of junior programming, you'll note that what the English people with the syllabus did was create these like phases, or I don't know, I guess you'd call them like kind of direction points or kind of subtopic points that are more aligned with our English skills and the way that we would sequence teaching and learning. So like one would be like connecting to the topic. One would be engaging with personal experience, engaging with textual analysis. So they actually have some for the stage 6 course now. So I would find those. I think there was about maybe 8 or 9 of them. I would find those. Then I would open the syllabus. So if you're doing, let's say, reading to write standard, I'd open that and I would look at the outcomes and the content points and I would match it up. And that's my learning sequence. Then that becomes week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Then I would pick my assessment task and then put that in the sequence so that the weekly activities are aligned to your content. The phases help connect them all. And then you're also doing the skills and they're building those skills until the final term assessment. That's kind of, I think, my last, if you want like a straight strategic, that's how I would do it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I might be using that trick there and tip there
like
as
that one?
we start programming. 100%. That's great. That's great. Because it just gives you greater focus and, you're not trying to think of
and it
things.
saves you time. You're not sitting there like, who has time to sit? I can do this. I can do. Oh, I've got one more good one too, actually, that I just thought of.
Go ahead.
So if you're, I don't know about accessibility outside of Department of Education. They might have their own version, but if you're a Department of Education teacher, they've got the New South Wales EduChat. They've got like their own AI platform, which you can actually use to even help create the bones or a lesson sequence. So you could put in there, so you can put in there, like it's not obviously ever going to be as detailed as it would as a teacher, but it saves time in that initial planning and then you can just focus on fleshing it out properly. So if you could put in there the phases and the content points and let it kind of churn something out for you. And I find this is really good when I know I want to do something, but I'm not exactly sure on the direction. And then it gives me ideas and then my brain goes, oh, well, I'm going to do mine this way then. So I think the important thing is like not to think that that's going to do everything for you. I don't think AI can replace what we can do, but it's a nice little starting point or time saver. You definitely could use that in some regard as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic practical tips there. I think you've covered some fantastic things. And remember, for our listeners, please make sure you guys are listening out and watching our videos as well. We've got a few videos coming up that will help you with the scope and sequences, the programming. We might even look at some of the documents that Bill has alluded to here, just to sort of help guide us. And all we ask of you guys is just to give us a like, a share, a shout out, keep listening. We're loving some of the interactions we're having with our community so far. And we're trying to build another sort of network here of English teachers where we'll be able to sort of connect amongst the whole state here and then hopefully move into English in terms of other states as well eventually. But no, that's some fantastic stuff today, Bill. Thank you so much for helping us with the programming and the assessment sort of notifications and just how we sort of go about planning for this new syllabus, because it is daunting amidst the busyness of life. So we understand and we really appreciate what you have brought to the table for our listeners and for me, actually, like I said today. So no, thank you for that. But that brings us to the end of our episode for today. Once again, guys, to help us out, we would love for you guys to find us on TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube. Give us a follow, a like. We want comments in the chats as well. So just give us that interaction, and we'll continue to pump out as much content as possible for you guys, helping you out. And at the moment, like I said, we're just doing this out of the goodness of our heart. We love this. We love this sort of interaction with you guys, and we love English and English teaching. We're very passionate about it, and we want to sort of help everyone out in getting to the best areas that they can with whatever little knowledge we have. So thank you once again, Belle, for this awesome episode, and thank you, listeners.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adriel. All right, amazing.
Cool.
That's a great little episode. I think people are going to love that one.
Yeah.